All right, we're going to slate this for the Edward Gorey documentary interview number 2 and slate.
The Blue Aspic was the first book I bought with my own money. And I'd seen Edward Gorey's work here and there. It was an experience growing up where I would be in someone's living room and I would take down what looked like a kid's book and I would open it, and it was this dark, strange world. And it was so hypnotizing to me. I didn't know what they were. You know, it was like the first book I saw that was a complete mystery to me. They were shaped like kids' books. They were little. You know, they had the language of a picture book, but the narrative to a child was incomprehensible except when it was terrifying. It seemed almost like pornography to me to ask for it or to try to get my parents to buy me one because they were so weird, and I knew they were so weird. They were just mysterious, mysterious objects to me. So I bought one at this bookstore in San Francisco with my own hard-saved allowance. I started to buy a lot of Edward Gorey. When you meet other people who read Edward Gorey when they were kids, everybody made up something about him. Everybody said, oh, obviously I knew these were old British books, or these were books that were really written by some famous author. They're really by Virginia Woolf, or they're really by this. I think Edward Gorey and his various pseudonyms that were always kind of obvious anagrams were part of the mystery, that somehow Edward Gorey seemed like he was in those books, or that he lived in a world that was like that of his books. You know, it just never occurred to me that he was a guy sitting someplace drawing and writing. That seemed wrong. And that was just a huge influence on the world of Lemony Snicket, that when I started to write these books for children, I wanted to present a world in which the mystery was intact. The adoption of the Lemony Snicket persona and publishing the books under the name of the narrator, Lemony Snicket, and to have these photographs of me with my face obscured and all that, and to never admit that I was Lemony Snicket to my readership seemed as important to me as the text of the books themselves. The first time the Lemony Snicket books were reviewed in the New York Times, they called Snicket the love child of Edward Gorey and Dorothy Parker, and I thought, like, my life is now complete. I'm exactly where I wanted to be my entire life. I think that mystery, that kind of elusive but very tangible mystery of Edward Gorey, is to me what survives. I would just get some scrap of information of, oh yeah, he was involved in a Broadway show, and I would think, like, the Edward Gorey I'm thinking of couldn't be involved in a Broadway show unless it was a murder backstage in 1910. If you mention Edward Gorey to someone, you either get who, or you get, oh, of course. Whenever I imagined meeting Edward Gorey, it was like the first 20 minutes of a Hammer horror movie. You know, where I would be in a carriage, and then the carriage driver would say, like, I will go no further than this, and so I'd have to take my own suitcase up to the house, and I would go in, and, you know, some servant would say, like, you have to wait here, and I would wait in this, like, sumptuous room that would have a mysterious brandy or something in it, and then finally Edward Gorey would come down and say, like, I'm so sorry, I kept you waiting, like, won't you have a sip of this mysterious, I don't know what it was. That was what I envisioned. In my mind, I don't think of Edward Gorey as someone you could know. I just think of him as part of this magical world. And then when the first 2 Snicket books were published, I sent them to Edward Gorey with a note saying how much I admired his work and how I hoped that he forgave me for all that I stole from him. And then, a short while later, he was dead. Probably my package was part of a mountain of packages unopened in his house. I like that he turned out in many ways to be ordinary, because what he did was make the extraordinary ordinary. He drew and wrote a world in which catastrophic things were happening with utter regularity. Well, my favorite Edward Gorey books were these books that had children in danger, these books that had terrible things going on, but dared you to laugh at them. He never winked at you about them. Only said, this is awful, and let you laugh at it. I mean, The Hapless Child I read to tatters when I was a kid, and it is about an orphan that goes through a series of unfortunate events. So, in the imaginary cocktail party in which Lemony Snicket is standing around with Neil Gaiman and Tim Burton and Guy Madden and Amanda Palmer and Trent Reznor and Michelle Gondry, all these people, we all owe everything to Edward Gorey.